On the global stage, the United States of America has managed to amass so much global dominance as a result of their currency being used as the reserve currency. If we zoom in a little bit into Zimbabwe, we realize that we've got the National Development Strategy 1, which was envisioned to de-dollarize the economy and ensure that we use the Zimbabwean dollar as a medium of exchange of choice by the citizens. And then if we look into the region, we have got BRICs, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, who have put together their GDPs, their economies, and their currencies to try and dethrone the US dollar from its global dominance. And Zimbabwe is intending to join that BRICs in order to de-dollarize and move with the agenda before 2030. Now, are we ready for that? That's the question that we are going to be addressing in this episode of The World of Business. And if you're joining just now, this is The World of Business, your weekly show where we get to talk about trending business stories as well as giving you the latest updates on the stock markets. We also take the opportunity to talk about entrepreneurs who are shaping the business landscape of Zimbabwe. Hello, my name is Steve Tadzoka and welcome to this episode of The World of Business. We're going to delve into that story, but for now, we give you the exchange rates as of today.
Exchange rates as of Wednesday, the 20th of September were: the Zimbabwe dollar to the United States dollar interbank rate was at $5,015.42. The Zimbabwe dollar to the British pound interbank rate was at $6,215.87. The Zimbabwe dollar to the euro interbank rate was at $5,358.23. The Zimbabwe dollar to the South African rand interbank rate was at $0.0037. The Zimbabwe dollar to the Botswana pula interbank rate was at $367.12.
We also give you commodity prices as they are on the global market.
Commodity prices as of Wednesday afternoon were: gold per ounce traded at $1,952.80 after it went down by 0.05 percentage points. Silver per ounce traded at $23.56 after it went up by 0.42 percentage points. Copper per pound traded at $376.20 after it went up by 0.40 percentage points. Platinum per ounce traded at $946.46 after it went down by 0.22 percentage points.
That's all we had for you on the first segment of The World of Business. Do join me in the second segment of The World of Business, where we're going to dive deeper into the issue of Zimbabwe joining BRICs. Are we ready to de-dollarize? Stay tuned. Welcome back to the second segment of The World of Business. My name is Steve Tadzoka, and as I've alluded earlier on, we're going to be looking into the conversation around the preparedness of Zimbabwe to de-dollarize as we join the mandate of BRICS, a special economic arrangement between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa to ensure that we take the power from the US dollar that has seen itself as a global dominant currency. And to help me unpack that conversation, I'm joined by Mr. Malone Gwadu, who is an economic analyst, and Mr. Persistence Gwanyanya, who is an economist. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to The World of Business.
Thank you for having us on the program.
Right, Mr. Gwadu, over to you. With the introduction of the gold coins, the gold-backed digital tokens, as well as the auction system as ways to try and alleviate the runaway inflation, as well as try to regulate the movement of the price in terms of the parallel market, how have these initiatives worked so far in terms of doing their purpose?
Thank you very much, Stephen. I think the initiatives put by government have really addressed the concerns around excess liquidity, which has been in the market for a while, which has consequently had an effect on the exchange rate, as well as a bit of market indiscipline around currency management, which has made it quite difficult for the central bank to be able to have positive and correlated impact of policy pronouncements on the market. So in a nutshell, I would say these are positive effects as we are in the price discovery phase of the currency introduction in our country. So the gold-backed digital currencies has helped as an alternative for a hedge instrument, as saving alternative, as well as reducing pressure on the demand for foreign currency and limiting it to disciplined demand towards production and not for speculation or anything outside the economic intent of government and the overall Zimbabwe.
Thank you for that. And then, Mr. Persistence, following up on the response given by Mr. Gwadu, you realize that the National Development Strategy's aim is to make sure that the local currency becomes the favorable currency of trade in Zimbabwe. But if you look at the statistics that were issued out by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, you'd realize that 90% of the loans that are being given out by the banks are in foreign currency, and 80% of the bank's deposits are also in forex. Are we still on course in terms of meeting this de-dollarization agenda according to the National Development Strategy 1?
True, there are challenges that we experiencing as regards dollarization and intensifying dollarization in the economy. But you may also want to look at that from a perspective of the trade-off that is naturally there by virtue of us pursuing one or two objectives that are important as we rebuild the economy. There is the infrastructure question, there is the economic rebuilding question, and the currency question. There is therefore need to achieve a critical balance amongst all the three or so key questions of the day. So we basically are in a trilemma as a country, and what we see on the currency could be as a reflection of the progress that we have made somewhere. We have made significant progress in infrastructure development, which is visible, which we concur, we agree that there is significant progress. But we have achieved that at the expense of what? We have achieved that at the expense of stability. Now, going forward, I think the quick question would be, we need to optimize. We need to come up with an optimal approach to the key imperatives, pressing needs of the country today. So as I'm talking, the question of currency, yes, in terms of the increased dollarization in the economy is concerning, but also of late we have seen a measure of stability. And like my colleague has indicated, we are also trying to come up with measures to sustain stability whilst also forging ahead with other pressing needs of the country, infrastructure, the growth of the real sectors of the economy, which has actually been happening, and which you may agree with me, it has been happening.
Thank you for those sentiments. And over to you, Mr. Gwadu. He's alluded to the infrastructural development that we have managed to achieve as a nation, and it has come at a cost in terms of the stability of our currency. And one of the primary sources of those influxes and fluctuations and volatility of our local currency is the payment of government contractors. When they get paid, we know the rate is going to spin out of control. Now, looking at all those factors, do we have the conditions that are sustainable for us to move towards a de-dollarization as a nation?
Thank you, Steve. Firstly, we need to commend the ambition that government has of infrastructure development, as well as overall economic development anchored around infrastructure and community development. It's quite key, and it's pivotal, and it's a real capital formation for medium to long-term growth. But now, narrowing it down to the sustainable stability for de-dollarization, there's need for us to learn from the past so that we prepare ourselves for the future. We have learned that infrastructure, yes, is good, but it may need to be realigned so that it reflects to the nature and the features that it has. Funding long-term projects using short-term funds such as the budget and the fiscus can be detrimental to the currency management framework of the country, in the sense that it creates liquidity pressure that will then consequently cause exchange rate volatility. However, if the conditions are realigned, I do believe de-dollarization is quite possible for the country to adopt a monocurrency, which is the Zimbabwe dollar, do away gradually with the dual currency, and in the medium to long term achieve both growth, sustainable development, and sustainable stability for the overall benefit of both the government, the population, and business in the country.
Very interesting there. And Zimbabwe being an ally of Russia, over to you, Mr. Persistence Gwanyanya. Zimbabwe being an ally of Russia and Russia being a member of BRICs, what policy framework do we need to have in place as a country as we adopt the de-dollarization agenda of the BRICs? And since they are taking away power from the USD as a reserve currency, what policy measures do we have to put in place as a country, as the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, as a people, in order to sustain and move with the mandate of BRICs in de-dollarization?
So the preeminence of the US has remained, but countries, nations are trying to challenge that. Post-global financial crisis, there is a term that was coined which speaks about the new normal, that there is now shift of power and influence, economic power and influence, from the West to the East. And this is reality. And even the flow of capital is now uphill, that is from the South to the North, unlike in the past. So because of the changing geopolitical influences and order, it has become important for the country to also align with where power is pivoting, where power is trending. And this is exactly why the initiative to also look to the East and to try and join the BRICS bank is seen as commendable in my view. But also importantly, because the West has not been friendly to Zimbabwe and have imposed restrictive measures on the country, it is also prudent for the country to look at those that are friendly to it for sustainable growth and development. So it is in line with today's realities, global realities, and the circumstances we find ourselves in as a country, that we relate to friendly nations, that we relate to where power is moving.
Very interesting. And now, as a follow-up to Mr. Gwadu, you'd realize that the Central Bank of Zimbabwe, which is the RBZ, for compliance reasons, has held the power and the will to control the supply of currency. So when we then dive into the BRICs, are we replacing the US dollar as a reserve currency, or we are actually trading with BRICs? And if we are going to be trading with the BRICs currency, are we going to have the sustainable compliance policies in place to ensure that we circulate what we get from BRICs and not have the temptation to then introduce new currency reserves?
Thank you, Steve. I think the introduction of the BRICs currency is welcome, and there is no threat to the central bank operations around compliance or control around the economy. The US dollar has been the reference currency for the world, but the world has different features and sectors and segments that have different economic, political, demographic features. So there's need for an alternative currency, if I may put it that way, that speaks to the reflection of these. And the BRICS currency speaks to a phenomenon called the global South economics, where there's attention towards countries around features around the BRICS countries. So the currency will then come to serve more efficiently and more effectively in promoting trade, investment, and alternative references for currencies trading in between the BRICS currencies. So whilst there will be a bit of independence or sovereignty around individual countries' currencies, it will be a reference point for trade amongst BRICS currencies. So it's not coming in as a replacement for central bank operations, but it's coming in as an enhancer for trade between BRICS countries, as well as alternative as a global reference for trade in BRICS and probably beyond BRICS.
Very interesting. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming through and shedding more light on the issue that we were discussing.
Thank you.
Right, and that brings us to the end of this segment of the world of business. Now, very interestingly, we have had a hangover of the usage of the US dollar since 2008, and we have had so many transitions in terms of trying to find the market value for our local currency. And we hope that with the BRICs initiative, we are going to be able to reconcile and stimulate the much needed trust for people to use the local currency, which is the Zimbabwean dollars, as a medium of exchange. And we are now going to go on a short break, and then after the break we'll give you the entrepreneur for the week. But for now, stay tuned. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the World of Business, where we feature the entrepreneur for the week. Now, the World of Business team spoke to Mr. Anthony Patros, a local entrepreneur specializing in the chicken processing and distribution. Let us hear more from Stella Marere as she speaks to Mr. Anthony Patros.
As the nation works towards achieving Vision 2030, which places emphasis on improving food self-sufficiency and retaining the regional breadbasket status, it is important to note that there are citizens working tirelessly behind the scenes to support the government in this regard. It is against this background that I'm joined here today by Mr. Anthony Patros, specializing in slaughter services and providing a market for poultry farmers, citizens of Zimbabwe, as well as fast food outlets. Can you tell us the history behind starting this abattoir? What were the factors motivating you starting it?
The most important thing which came to my mind about this chicken business, I grew up from a raw background. I've got a raw background. With that, I realized that the fastest agricultural activity that I can do in this country is poultry industry. From that understanding of poultry industry, I saw the gap in this nation in terms of processing those birds. Because yes, we have production, we now need to process the chickens for those fast foods, for those butcheries, for the institutions of the Zimbabwe. So having this opportunity that government is open to youth, that's what motivated myself to, starting my own processing plant.
Mr. Patros, you have mentioned the reasons why you decided to start this abattoir. Now I would want to know, how old were you when you started this abattoir, and what steps did you take to start this enterprise?
I was very young by that time. I've got my brother called Ntando, who was mentoring myself towards that business, who actually lectured myself how do you do it. By that time we were growing chickens, doing contract growing with Ivan, Sar and other companies.
Okay.
That's when I realized that's when I know much about chicken industry.
Okay. So what did you start with? Did you just start with one fowl run, or maybe you started with a lot of chickens at the same time? I want to know the very first time you started keeping chickens, and also at what point did you then start a processing plant?
Well, what happened to us, to myself, opportunity is the greatest thing that happens to my life. I got so many opportunities. You know, in the poultry industry, there are great people who are there that needs support from the youth, that needs people with vision, people who are transparent in operations. So when we started, I had a fowl run in Norton that is a capacity of 10,000. That's when I started keeping birds, selling to Mbare people and other guys that comes and buy chickens. Then doing so, I was then given an opportunity to run an abattoir. From there, I then saw myself that I'm able to do this, because I constructed it from scratch to it running. With that, I then get an opportunity again. That's why I was saying the opportunity, because I was in the field. So opportunities were coming to my table. Where the owner, everything was down, dilapidated, and there was nothing. The only thing that I had to do is to sell what was remaining to myself. Then I resuscitated everything, the factory, as it you have seen so far. That's how I started in abattoir, 2023, 1st of June.
Earlier on, you did mention that the government also had a role that it played in you starting this chicken processing plant. Let's talk about the role that the government played for the benefit of that person who is listening and would probably want to venture into the same thing.
They are mantras that supports young people to do their thing. There is no way that government will come to you and say, here is the fowl run, here is the place to do the abattoir. Can you do the abattoir? It's up to you to grab the opportunity. And that opportunity, and look towards what the government is saying concerning that industry. Be it farming, be it mining or so. The government has favorable policies in achieving good results in our activities.
One of the main objectives under the National Development Strategy 1 is to increase food self-sufficiency to 100% and to reduce food insecurity to less than 10% by 2025. Firstly, I would want to know from you as a business person, do you think this is achievable as a nation?
Well, where you see the president of this country is running with the mantra, "Nyika inovakwa nevenevai." I'm the youth. I'm the son of this country. I'm doing it. We are doing it. Together, we do it. So it's very, very possible to grow our country. It's very, very possible to 100% sure that every corner of Zimbabwe has food. We have the command agriculture, command farming. Coming back, we have the poultry industry there. So everyone will be fully satisfied.
Definitely.
Yes.
Indeed, we can agree that Zimbabwe is filled with so many opportunities that we as citizens can explore in order to ensure that we've reduced food insecurity to less than 10% by 2025 or even earlier before that. How, in your own view, is your enterprise, this chicken processing plant, is contributing to us achieving that margin?
In terms of achieving 100% self-sufficient, number one, in our country, we have higher learning institutions that train our people, especially in agricultural institutions that train our people to have better knowledge. You know, when you are doing this thing, mind you, we need to achieve an upper middle income, probably by 2030. So by doing so, government is pushing towards having quality human product. You get the sense? So in terms of human capital, we are okay. Our team that you have seen in our plant are well trained. That's why you see no mistakes, no what. They're well trained, they went to colleges. Government is introducing various institutions, various agricultural activities. Number one, we have command agriculture, command farming. You get the sense? We have vast and plenty of maize. We have surplus. We have sunflowers. We have everything that we need to make our own feed, to feed our chicks. So with that, we are able to self-sustain ourselves. Why? Because we have our feed. We can make our own feed. We don't need to import feed. We don't need to import concentrate to make feed. We can make our own concentrate. From there, beds are grown with the farmers. Farmers who have been equipped, given loans to build the infrastructure that are good and suitable to grow chickens. After that, they bring those chickens to my abattoir. With that, we then distribute chickens around the country.
Lastly, Mr. Patros, after this conversation that we have had with you placing emphasis on developing homegrown solutions as citizens of Zimbabwe, as far as developing our own nation is concerned, and you also did mention that we have got so many opportunities as a country and we are resourced and capacitated enough to ensure that food security is eventually achieved as a nation. As your words of inspiration or your parting words to the viewers of all ages that are listening to you and watching you right now.
My words of inspiration to the listeners around the world, in our country, let's embrace government projects. What government introduces, go for it. It is important. The government will give support. And their policies are there to build the nation. And how do we build the nation? We do it together. That's number one. And as well, number two, focusing. and have discipline in whatever industry that you're working in. You get the sense? So if you're focused, you achieve better and you do well. Yeah, you must be disciplined for people to work with you. People need someone who's disciplined. They support you. So with that, with those characters, you are good to go. That's it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patros, for joining us today for the fruitful conversation we've had with you today. Indeed, it is very possible for Zimbabwe to achieve food security to 100% and to reduce food insecurity by 10% in 2025. From the conversation we've had, also we've picked that discipline and focus are very key in as far as aspiring entrepreneurs and business people out there are concerned. That concludes this week's segment of our Entrepreneur of the Week. Be sure to join us again next week. It's now back to the studio.
That was the third and final segment of the World of Business that brought into the spotlight the initiatives being done by Mr. Anthony Patros in as far as achieving food security is concerned. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the World of Business. Do catch us next time on your favorite TV channel. Next week, same time, same place. For now, pleasant viewing.